So today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 19, Text 9. We can read the Sanskrit, the translation, and the purport, and then we will recite a few prayers, and then we'll get into the discussion. Before I begin, I'll just chant Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Again, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 19, Text 25. Satatra nirmukta samasta sangha. And share my screen so that all of you can see it. Just 1 second. Can everybody see my screen? Is that good? Okay. Satatra nirmukta samasta sangha atmanubhutya viduta trilanga pare male brahmani vasudeve lebe gatim bhagavatim pratita. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Because Yayati completely surrendered unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vasudeva, he was freed from all contamination of the material modes of nature. Because of his self-realization, he was able to fix his mind upon the transcendence Param Brahman Vasudeva, and thus he ultimately achieved the position of an associate of the Lord. The word viduta, meaning cleansed, is very significant. Everyone in this material world is contaminated. Karanam gunasangasya. Because we are in a material condition, we are contaminated either by sattva guna, by rajo guna, or by tamoguna. Even if one becomes a qualified brahmana in the mode of goodness, sattva guna, he is still materially contaminated. One must come to the platform of Shuddha Sattva, transcending the Sattva Guna. Then one is Viduta Trilanga, cleansed of the contamination caused by the three modes of material nature. This is possible by the mercy of Krishna. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 1-17. Shrunvatam svakata Krishna, punya shravana kirtanaha, hridayantasto hi abhadrani vidunoti srotsatam. Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma, supersoul in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. A person trying to be perfectly Krishna conscious, by hearing the words of Krishna from Srimad Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, certainly has all the dirty things cleansed from the core of his heart. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also says, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. The process of hearing and chanting the glories of the Supreme Lord washes away the dirty things accumulated in the core of the heart. As soon as one is freed from all the dirt of material contamination, as Maharaj Yayati was, one's original position as an associate of the Lord is revealed. This is called Swarupa Siddhi, or personal perfection. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmiritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadam Hyam Dadati Supadantikam. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. I'll read the translation again. Because King Yayati completely surrendered unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudev, he was freed from all contamination of the material modes of nature. Because of his self-realization, he was able to fix his mind upon the transcendence, Parabrahman, Vasudev, and thus he ultimately achieved the position of an associate of the Lord. The Srimad Bhagavatam, we will see right from the start of the Srimad Bhagavatam, from the first canto, there is a clear description of what we call exit strategy from the material world. That we see how very successful, materially successful devotees, individuals, when the time came for them to leave the material world. In fact, I would say even before the time came for them to actually leave the material world, they were sufficiently prepared to leave it behind. We will see the first canto right from the beginning. We'll see Bhishma Dev. You'll see the example of the Pandavas. There is a chapter in the first canto called "The Pandavas Retire Timely," and I love the title of that chapter, "The Pandavas Retire Timely," because it shows how, despite everything that the Pandavas were involved in, and finally towards the end of their life, they were essentially ruling the entire world. They united the entire world under one banner, which was completely dedicated to serving Krishna. They knew when to leave it. And then we see towards the end of the first canto, we see the example of King Parikshit, who was the grandson of Arjuna, of the Pandavas. And again, knowing how to leave the material world. When somebody was, and it's explained that King Parikshit was at the prime of his ruling. It was not that they had, he had become really old and invalid. He was at the prime of his ruling. And then he knew how to leave the material world behind. And then when we proceed through the other cantos of the Bhagavatam, we see so many examples. Kartama Muni, we see the example of, in the fourth canto, we see the example of Uttanapad, we see the example of Dhruva Maharaj, we see the example of King Prutu, we see the example of Prachini Barishat and the Prachetas. Like all of these kings who were very deeply involved in a strong sense of identity in the material world as kings, as rulers, and they all knew how to leave the material world. I would say they prepared for that, even as they were conducting their material lives. So this is a very big characteristic of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that it gives us these examples. It doesn't shy away from actually talking about how it describes the story of all of these great personalities. And it doesn't shy away from talking about how these personalities prepared to leave the material world. And not just prepared to leave the material world, it talks about them leaving this material world. Which for us should be a very big sign that the Srimad Bhagavatam is a book that explicitly teaches us how to prepare to leave the material world. So in this verse, again, in the 9th canto of the Bhagavatam, we see the example of King Yayati, who we have been reading the story of King Yayati for a little while, who had a pretty complicated life. And we see how King Yayati desired youth and exchanged his youth with his son, and all of those things. And then again, there is a way in which, despite all of the material attachments, there is a time when we see King Yayati leaving the material world and going back to Krishna, becoming an eternal associate with Krishna. And Prabhupada, in the purport, very explicitly lists out how that happens. So I'm just going to read the purport a little bit here, just to remind us of what Srila Prabhupada is talking about, and then we can discuss. Prabhupada starts the purport by saying the word viduta meaning cleansed is very significant. Everyone in this material world is contaminated. Right? And we can experience it on a day-to-day basis. At least I can, very in a very pronounced way. The modes of material nature have such a strong pull and effect on our consciousness. And one of the questions during the month of Karthik, actually, the one question that I really asked myself was, if Krishna were to appear in front of me and say, I am going to give you the chance to live in Vrindavan for the rest of your life. But the price for that is you must decide to leave right now. Like, pack your bags and leave. Would I be able to do it? And very embarrassing and very confronting. The answer was, I wouldn't be able to do it. And it was very confronting for me. And I have been meditating on that quite a bit, just to see the gap that still exists for me in terms of really becoming 100% surrendered to Krishna's desires, and actually wanting to serve Krishna with every single moment that I have. And the recognition that I'm still conditioned by the modes of material nature, very deeply conditioned by the modes of material nature. And of course, it shouldn't be a surprise because I am. And at the same time, it was very confronting that I'm still not ready to leave this material world fully behind. So Prabhupada mentions in this purport how, because we are in a material condition, we are contaminated either by sattva guna, by rajoguna, or by tamoguna, the three modes of material nature: mode of goodness, passion, and ignorance. And in the Gita, in chapter 14, which is called the three modes of material nature, Krishna talks about the conditioning or the binding of each of those three material modes. So in chapter 14, text 9, Krishna says, Sattvam sukhe sanjayati, rajah karmani bharata, jnanam avrityatu tamaha, pramade sanjayatyuta. He says, O son of Bharata, the mode of goodness conditions one to happiness, passion conditions one to fruit of action, and ignorance, covering one's knowledge, binds one to madness. And the idea here is that Prabhupada emphasizes that in his purport. Says, even if one becomes a qualified Brahmana in the mode of goodness, he is still materially contaminated. And it is interesting to note how the mode of goodness, as Krishna describes it in the Gita, conditions one to happiness. Right? What does that mean? Would anyone like to share what conditioning in the mode of goodness looks like? Any thoughts? Yes, Adipurush, please.
Certainly there's harmony and kind of a gentle existence, but it's selfish.
Can you explain the selfishness?
It's selfish, looking for our own comfort, rather than saying, Krishna, what do you want?
Okay.
Who's in the center? We can make a pretty cozy situation in this world, you know.
It's interesting that sometimes the conditioning in the mode of goodness uh, may not even be cozy. From the outside, like someone living, for example, in the Himalayas, in the forest, like completely in nature, and living a very simple life, to be honest. It has a small hut and can be living there and growing his own or her own organic, you know, fruits and vegetables, and that can be a very good life, to be honest. um, uh, Anand Bihari Prabhu, did you have something to share? I saw you turned on your screen.
Yeah, regarding the selfishness and the mode of goodness, Adipusha Prabhu really nailed it. I just wanted to add, you may think that you know everything, and that prevents you from inquiring further.
Uh-huh.
And then sometimes in the mode of goodness, you may think that you are kind of higher and more evolved than everybody else. That makes
Uh-huh.
you a little proud.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So, mode of goodness is characterized by knowledge, as Krishna explains in the Gita. And Krishna also says that it binds one to happiness. And the quality of this happiness, it's actually pretty, you feel free. It's amazing how in the mode of goodness, one is bound by feeling unbound a little bit. There is a certain paradoxical nature to it, and as Anand Bihari Prabhu explained, it's characterized by knowledge, and knowledge not necessarily of material things, but spiritual knowledge. I feel free. I feel that I'm no longer burdened in a certain way. I have insights into the way the material world operates. There is a sense of, as Adipurush Prabhu said, harmony. There is a sense of internal peace and satisfaction. That is a very big characteristic of the mood of goodness. I'm satisfied. And what happens is I become conditioned to feeling satisfied. And I've been recently reading Giriraj Swami's book on Srila Prabhupada and the building of the Juhu temple, which the historical details are pretty incredible. And how Giriraj Maharaj describes the struggle for the Juhu land when Prabhupada was fighting for the temple against all odds. Prabhupada emphasizing that there must be anxiety. And to be honest, each time Prabhupada was repeating that, I was feeling very uncomfortable because I don't want anxiety in my life. I've been trying really hard to break free of that experience of anxiety in the material world, which also ties very strongly to what I shared earlier about, if the question that I was asking myself, if Krishna appears in front of me and says, I'll give you the opportunity to live in Vrindavan for the rest of your life. Will I take it? No. There is a certain way in which I'm really trying my best to build a life where there is no anxiety. And I also recognize that I want that state so that I can actually think about Krishna and remember Krishna. But it is so subtle that when we desire that, especially in the mode of goodness, there is a conditioning to living life without anxiety. And when anxiety appears, even when anxiety appears in Krishna's service, I would say, no, I don't want to do that because it's too much anxiety. And that is the conditioning in the mode of goodness. Right? So Prabhupada then repeats again, says, even if one becomes a qualified Brahmana in the mode of goodness, Sattva Guna, he's still materially contaminated. And that is the material contamination. That material contamination is the freedom from the experience of freedom from anxiety that I know, having worked in the mode of passion, in the mode of ignorance, especially in the mode of passion, for a very long time in my life, it's painful. And so when we can imagine and perhaps even get a chance to live our life free from that anxiety, it's very attractive. And we become conditioned to it. So much so that even when we are offered a position to be able to serve Krishna 24 hours a day, to be with Krishna, we can find ourselves saying, "Oh, too much. That's a lot. I just want to be free from anxiety. I want to be peaceful." And I remember His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami, who I had the good fortune of spending some time with just as he was leaving the material world, back in 2005 in Gitanagari. And he was giving a series of talks on die before dying, which was incredible. I get goosebumps even thinking about it, even today. And there was one class where he was talking about how sometimes we arrive in a place where this is the last door we need to walk through. And as soon as we walk through this door, Krishna will give us everything. Basically, like it is an eternal position serving him. And he said that it is so tragic that as soon as we come close to the door, we'll say, "You know what? I'm good here. I don't want to go through it. I'm just good here." And he was just talking about how tragic that is. Right? And we say that, and that's why the mode of goodness is such a trap, because when we so in one sense the mode of goodness is a necessary step and perhaps an amazing launching platform to be able to very deeply experience Krishna. So this is not to put down the mode of goodness, but this is also to say how one can be so trapped in the mode of goodness, right? That when we are offered eternal service to Krishna, we can find ourselves saying no to it. And the Srimad Bhagavatam, more than any other scripture, the Srimad Bhagavatam really emphasizes this point and also gives us stories. So we described how many stories the Srimad Bhagavatam talks about the lives of the kings who leave the material world and who prepare to leave it behind. Even when they had very comfortable lives and they were also highly successful at the peak of their tenure, so to say. And it also gives us examples of, especially one example of Bharat Maharaj, who became conditioned in the mode of goodness and was on track for going back home, back to Godhead, and lost the opportunity. And that can very easily happen to us. I can see that. I can so clearly see that can happen to me, and I struggle with that a lot personally. So the idea here, and Prabhupada is really emphasizing that we must prepare to go beyond the mode of goodness, and that takes work. That takes for us to constantly gauge the quality of our bhakti, to ask ourselves the question, well, am I desiring my comfort? And Adi Purush Prabhu said that before. He said it's selfish. And it may not appear as selfish, because desiring peace for myself and for everybody else in the material world is not a bad thing. But it is important for us to ask the question of ourselves, do we really want to be with Krishna? Do we really want to be serving Krishna in Vrindavan? And Burijan Prabhu once told me this, which was very, very striking. He said that we have to understand that as we aspire for that, even if we aspire for that, that all the important positions in the spiritual world have already been taken. So, so even when we go back home, back to God, we're not going to be someone important. We may not even see Krishna directly, but we may be somebody who has to bring water for somebody to cook in the kitchen for Krishna, and that our seva may just be bringing water from the river every day, which may seem very insignificant. But are we prepared to serve Krishna as Krishna wants us to serve him? That is a very confronting question. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in his Bhakti Tattva Viveka, in his book, which is a commentary on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Rupa Goswami, The Nectar of Devotion, he talks about how bhakti begins at the stage when we desire to serve Krishna exclusively. That is not to say that we are there. That is not to say that we are serving Krishna exclusively. This is developing a desire to serve Krishna exclusively. And when we can see us desiring that, or desiring to desire that, that is when we begin our actual bhakti. So it is pretty confronting to understand that is what is the true quality of bhakti. And Prabhupada writes in this purport, one must come to the platform of Shuddha Sattva, transcending the Sattva Guna. That is the meaning of Shuddha Sattva. There is no contamination here. One is not contaminated even by the experience of, I would say, liberation from suffering, to be honest. I don't even want that. We just sing Damodarashtakam prayers. We just sang for a month the prayers glorifying Mother Yashoda, tying Krishna, and glorifying Krishna and Radharani. And the fourth verse of that 8-verse beautiful composition, Damodarashtakam, is the devotee essentially telling Krishna, I do not desire liberation. And that's a pretty high bar, to be honest. And Prabhupada keeps emphasizing this time and again when he talks about the Mayavadis, or he talks about people who are conditioned to attain liberation, and talking about how bhakti is much higher than that. And it truly is, when we understand what bhakti is aspiring for, the position of an eternal servant, not an easy thing to aspire for. And we can say it is not necessarily a condition that will externally appear peaceful. When we have to serve Krishna, and Prabhupada demonstrated it in his own life, there was nothing peaceful about it. Nothing peaceful about it. 2 heart attacks on the ship on the way here, struggling every single day on the Lower East Side to establish the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And then once the society was established, there was one struggle after another. Prabhupada did not expect an easy life for him. And you know what? At his age, if he chose to embrace an easy life, living in Vrindavan, this is not even this is a life of devotion, right? He could have lived in Vrindavan, in Radha Damodar temple, serving Krishna every day. He chose a life of anxiety. And when Prabhupada writes this, he's writing it from that platform to remind us that is what we have to deep down in our hearts actually desire. And again, I'm not saying that we may be there, but that's our aspiration. That is what the Srimad Bhagavatam the examples that the Srimad Bhagavatam gives. And that is also the example of all our acharyas. They aspire to serve Krishna from a place of not even wanting to be free from the anxiety of the service. And it's a preparation. That condition happens when it is important for us to measure our own desires in our devotional service, to see where we are at. And the only way we can break into that the other side, so to say, is we have to draw a line on the sand. We have to proactively want to leave things behind that give us a sense of peace. And it is scary when we have to think about that. It's scary to think about, wow, should I leave a certain life behind? Because that life does help us remember Krishna. Material security, certain amount of financial security, relational security. All of those things can many times give us a platform to remember Krishna, to serve Krishna peacefully. And then thinking about, well, do I just want to be peaceful? Or can I desire to live a life that Krishna would like for me to live? Perhaps even taking anxiety for his service. And Prabhupada, I love this example, how Prabhupada gives this example of the mode of goodness being like the airport. And Prabhupada said that it's such a powerful visual. We come to the airport and we say, you know what, this is where I want to live. let me lay down my base at the airport, and we refuse to take the plane. King Yayati's life, we see his struggles, but then at a certain time, we also see how that's what the translation so powerfully states, because King Yayati completely surrendered unto the Supreme Personality of God. And Prabhupada writes in the purport, this is possible by the mercy of Krishna. By our own efforts, we can perhaps reach the mode of goodness. That's it. And Krishna says in the Gita, chapter 7, Daivihi esha gunamai mama maya duratyaya mam eva ye prapadyante maya metam tarantite. That going beyond the shackles of the modes of material nature requires exclusively Krishna's mercy. And we have to desire that very strongly. Again, Prabhupada, I was reading a lecture by Srila Prabhupada 2 days ago, and Prabhupada was talking about that very point, that freedom, that breaking free of the mode of goodness exclusively happens by Krishna's mercy. And we have to wait for Krishna to free us, but we have to desire, and Prabhupada was using this word, we have to be greedy for that. Laulyam, the desire to break free from even being at the airport, which is the mode of goodness. And Prabhupada writes here, that happens by Shrunvatam Svakata Krishna, listening, hearing every single day from individuals who are aspiring for that. And from individuals who are already at that stage. And because that greed is then transferred into our hearts. And when that greed is transferred into our hearts, we start to desire Krishna, who lives in our hearts, cleans all the remaining contamination, even the contamination of the mode of goodness. Right? And then we will experience that freedom, and more the desire to be eternally situated in Krishna's service. And that is what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada and all the teachers in the Parampara came to give us. They did not come to give us happiness in the mode of goodness. They came to give us something that's beyond this material world. Golokera Premadana Harinama Sankirtan. It is the love of Krishna descending directly from Sri Vrindavan. And that is a very special place. That giving that gift is we are incredibly fortunate to be connected to a lineage that is aspiring that kind of service. And so I would like to stop here. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments thus far?
Thank you for a wonderful class. Well, Rasanath, nice to see you.
Likewise, Hare Krishna. Okay.
I was there. I loved your confronting questions because I too was like, well, I don't know if I'd be ready to go. So I love that. That was really wonderful. And the other thing I was just really appreciating is, we know Vaikuntha means the place without anxiety. And we were talking about, the mode of goodness almost seems like we're trying to secretly make our own little Vaikuntha just for ourselves by hanging out in the mode of goodness and not releasing that little Vaikuntha, it's not really Vaikuntha, but our supposed, thing. So we're missing the real Vaikuntha. And it's reminding me of this story. And I always say, I hope this isn't a true experiment that I heard about. And I'm sure some people have heard about the two groups of frogs. And the one, group of frogs they put in the hot water.
That's right.
And they jumped immediately out because they weren't going to drown. But the other ones were like hanging out in the lukewarm water. Ooh, it's like a bath. And then those are the ones that ended up drowning. So the mode of goodness can very much like being in that nice bathtub water thing. Yeah,
it's so true. Thank you again for that example. It is very true. And the thing here is the mode of goodness is it's a place where we can actually start to think about Krishna without being bothered by the encumbrances of the material world, right? It's such a platform. But when we come there, then to be able to say, I want exclusively Krishna's service, right? And to be able to focus and pray for that. This is the challenge there is, we will not be able to break free of the mode of goodness without Krishna's help. And what that breaking free may be like is not something that we may actually like. And Prabhupada talks about how, when Krishna becomes especially merciful, he takes away everything. And I'm laughing because I dread it. I dread it. It's like, I think about it every night before I go to bed, and I dread that experience. I even asked my guru the question, is that a necessary thing for me to attain pure devotional service? Because I don't want that. I also told him that every saint that I know of had some experience of that. Is that a necessary condition? And he just laughed. So it's very confronting, and yet I feel like when I read the Bhagavatam, that's, in one sense, that's what I've been asked. That's what I'm being asked for, and so it's only by Krishna's help, really, only by Krishna's help. Thank you.
Yeah, does everybody see Jamuna Jaya's background? There's a peacock feather. She doesn't need to be transferred anywhere. She's there.
It's really sweet. Thank you. Angel, I saw your hand was up at some point in time. I don't know if you had a comment or a question.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Well, I was just thinking about how in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a lot of self-evaluation, and Krishna is talking to Arjuna as he's in his nature as to how to serve Krishna. And Arjuna, in his own unique way, he was able to serve Krishna.
Right.
by still being a warrior, still being in his nature.
Right.
And we've been gifted the
Right.
holy name, which
Yes.
is, so I think that is understanding that what Krishna wants, and because we're not in those times where we're in the forest and stuff, but it's understanding that in this material world, everything provides a sense gratification. So our true motives is, what can I do to please this sense gratification? Am I going to choose to follow the bhakti practices? Or am I going to choose it to actually look for something to temporarily satisfy me? And Krishna understands that we're in this material world, and that every child of his is in their own phase, in their own stage of how to surrender and to find that full contentment. And finding that full contentment can also be, okay, like I have these bondages, but I'm going to understand how to maneuver through this by chanting the holy name, and still having a healthy balance with serving my own family, my son or my brother or my sister or other children of God, and maintaining that healthy balance and still spreading the love of God through that, those actions. I feel like that's my version of full contentment and being able to serve Krishna, that on just, and not spreading the hate. Because one of the Prabhus had mentioned in one of the classes earlier this week how if you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else.
Right.
And thank you for the wonderful class. But like having that all anxiety is understanding that it's also just a vibration, a material attachment that we have to something, but we can surrender to the holy name, say that Maha Mantra from the heart, and understand that this anxiety is only a vibration of God, but I'm turning to you, God, and I'm turning whatever decision, whatever outcome you are gonna have for me in this position. I understand that there's going to be growth to it, or a path leading to you even more. And that's the reward. Like just saying that Maha Mantra and getting you through that whole experience of by chanting his holy name and really believing in him. He gives us that gift of like finding contentment in the chaos. He's literally holding me and guiding me, and like I had a head injury, I had a car accident, and I had pain with it, and I just always prayed and like, please don't let me be fully paralyzed, please don't. And then slowly, little but surely, I understood that at the end of the day, I don't have the call to make the choice of having mobility. I could only use certain things. I had to really surrender to God, is what I'm saying. So in our own unique way, we're surrendering to God, and having that healthy balance is
Right.
what he truly wants. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bhima Prabhu, oh my gosh, is that you? I couldn't even identify. That's amazing. I'm so happy to see you.
Likewise, Prabhu, you're wonderful. I remember first meeting you, and then I remember listening to a few of your speeches that you give to in your vocation, and just being just completely in awe. I'm completely in awe of all Radhanath Maharaj's young disciples. You guys are just shining stars, and I'm just very enthused and inspired. And I'm stuck here in the mode of horse manure, which I think is like sort of ignorance, but I'm doing what I can. I read just one short thing. Radhanath Maharaj once, we were taught, I said, Maharaj, I'm just trying to get into the mode of goodness. And he goes, don't be so sure that the mode of goodness is where you want to be is where you want to be, because that's where that's the demigods, they go to, that's where they are for millions and millions of years. That's why they're there for millions and millions of years. It's very easy to enjoy. And you don't forget Krishna. Krishna's shining all around you in those planets. But you're like, can I have a little? Radhanath said this. He goes, the demigods are like, I love you, Krishna, but I want a little something for myself. And that's why, and Krishna's like, just sure, no problem. And he just gives you all this enjoyment. And that's the trap of the material of the mode of goodness, is that you're happy. And, you know, and then we look at the gopis, or, you know, how miserable they're standing like paint pictures, like standing like still life in a painting, Prabhupada wrote, when Krishna pulled away, and that separation, and that goes on, and the heartbreak that goes on. Yeah, get ready to suffer. If you want Krishna, get ready to, you know, sweetly suffer. I'm not sweetly suffering. I'm just suffering. But it was so nice to hear you, and said somebody said that there was nobody, that all the important positions are taken.
Yeah,
in Goloka. Yeah. I want to differ with that, because Krishna, when he had lunch amongst the cowherd boys, every cowherd boy thought that he was looking at Krishna alone.
Yes.
You know, that Krishna was staring at him. Now, he might have been a cowherd boy out on the edge of the lotus petal of that luncheon that Krishna was to set the whirl of. But every cowherd boy felt that he was the cynosure of Krishna's attention, as did the gopis, etc. So, you know, it's very important to note, I can't remember the Prabhu who said it, but that Krishna does not stop at 16,108, if you know what I mean. He doesn't stop there at that number.
It's true.
So that's all I got to say. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. So good to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
I really appreciate everything you shared. Krishna. Anybody else would like to share anything in closing, or anything else? Any questions or comments? Adipushu?
Well, you know, we all have
appreciation in the chat. Go ahead, Adipushu.
Yeah, we all have that sense of dread, and, you know, we're afraid we're going to be dragged along screaming, you know. But actually, what we see, Srila Prabhupada, he has this warrior mentality.
Yep, it's true.
Come on, I'm fighting, I'm ready, and it is relishing the combat. And Krishna says to Arjuna, you know, abandon all desire for gain and safety and fight for me. So when we have the voice of Guru and our desires to serve Guru, the voice of the mind and senses pulling us to the mode of goodness and comfort and safety, there's another voice there. And if we're detached, nobody can force us to do anything, right?
Those are exact words.
Mara said to you, if you're detached, nobody can force you to do anything. You're free.
Yeah, that's right.
Free to gain, nothing to lose. Narayana Parasave Nakadatu. You're willing to go to heaven or hell, you don't care. You just, you know, if that's where you want me, I'm there. I'm happy. That's my satisfaction to see you, please, Krishna. And I love that warrior mentality, you know. Come on.
Yeah.
You know, I don't care. Let's do it. Get it on, you know. And they're relishing to be on the front lines like that. I'll say too much. We'll go to Bhakti Prabhupada.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Rasanath Prabhu, quickly. There's something in the chat from Preeti. Great class. Those distinctions in just staying in the mode of goodness versus desire to serve Krishna, regardless, are so important to understand. So I appreciate your explanation. Hare Krishna. So that was from Preeti. And there's a question from me. Can you briefly tell us that story where Radhanath Maharaj told you how if you're truly renounced, then no one can tell you what to do, or something to that effect?
Yeah. Oh wow. I didn't even realize that people remembered that story.
He told us.
This is I remember having shared it a couple of times. This was back in 2002. And there was a strong, Ramnath Swami was very strongly, like I saw that there were always indications from him that he wanted me to spend time in New York. Like ever since I came to the US, and I at that time I was working a consulting job, which required for me to travel a lot. And so I met Ramnath Swami in New Vrindavan in 2002, April of 2002 it was. And Maharaj was surprised to see me in New Vrindavan. And he said, Rasanath, what are you doing here? I said, Maharaj, I'm working, so I have to travel. So at that time I was stationed for a big client in Minneapolis. So I got to travel during the week, and then over the weekend I could go anywhere, paid by the client. I could go anywhere in the country. So I decided to travel to New Vrindavan because Maharaj was there. And so Maharaj was very surprised, and I saw the surprise in his face, and I also knew what he desired. And I told him, Maharaj, my situation is such that my boss wants to work me to work in this project. And at that time, the economy was not doing so good. So I was just telling him how, we are all in a place where we have to do what we are asked to do. And he looked at me and he nodded his head and he said, if you're detached, nobody can make you do anything. It's a big lesson. He was staring through the excuses, is how I saw it. And it also, through those comments and through those moments of teaching, and then he changed the topic and was something else. I realized like those small sentences really laid the foundation for many things in my life. I'll never forget the look in his eyes and how he said it. And till day, I remember that experience very vividly. And thank you for asking me to share it.
Yeah, we remember that too. I treasure that story. There's so many of us have a work outside of, pure devotional service. So, dear devotees, we want every one of you to tell your boss on Monday that he's not going to make you do anything. It's very detached.
Anyway, well, thank you all. Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Anand Bihari, for the service that you do, Adipurush Prabhu. Thank you very much. And thank you to each and every one of you. And please give me your blessings and your prayers that I can develop that greed just to exclusively serve Krishna. I'm very far from it.
We know you're a warrior. We know the warrior's heart.
I'm definitely not a warrior. I'm too sensitive, and I see it. I see my own sensitivity. I see every single day. I'm the front row seat. I have the front row seat about my own messes, to be honest. It's pretty messy. So I need the blessings, and honestly, the blessings of the devotees really attract Krishna's mercy. I know that for a fact. There is nothing more powerful than that. And I really request each and every one of you to pray for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Rasanath Prabhu. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Hariva.
Develop the greed. Don't stay in the airport. Get on the plane. All right.
Hariva.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.